I talk a lot about homes and styling and design, and today I wanted to take a step back from all of it to talk about something very different, something that I believe is at the heart of everything, and that is why I think we should think about the spaces where we live and why it's important to even be considerate about what we bring into our space and what I believe to be the core elements of intentional living. But first, hi, I'm Shreya. I'm very new to YouTube, but I run an interior design page on Instagram called Taro's House. We're also on a bunch of other platforms, but this is where you'll find the most updates from us. I run it with my partner Marco. It's named after my Chihuahua, Taro. I want to quickly show you some photos of what our home looks like. I'm currently in my bedroom. This is where I like to film. It's very cozy in here. My last video, I did do it in the living room. Let me know if this is not your first time watching me. Let me know which setting you prefer more. Okay, let's jump into the topic. For a bit of context, I have always been a very introspective person. I think very deeply about almost everything in life. That's just how I've always been. In my heart, I really do think that a lot of us are quite sensitive to our environments and the spaces that we call home. And whether or not we realize this, whether or not we like to admit this, I think as much as we have the power to shape where we live and how we decorate it, our spaces also have a lot of influence on who we are and how we grow. And I think that's something that is not often talked about. I really want to encourage people to think about the relationship that they have with their space, because I think that it can be a really introspective, a really meditative process. Before I go into what I believe are the core elements of intentional living, I really want to take some time to address the fact that I think being able to think about these kind of things, like where am I living, what is around me, and can I have any power or influence on it, is a very privileged position, and I do completely appreciate that. It's not something that a lot of us have the resources or time to think about, but I will say that that should not be considered a complete constraint. Back when I was growing up, I very short period of time, about 4 or 5 years, was in boarding school. In that environment, I had just my bed and my desk, and this is a boarding school back in India, so it's not really anything fancy. We had one room with 4 girls in there, and all I had was a bed and a desk, and that's it. That was my whole world, and I shared it with 3 other girls. And if you walked in and then you sat down on my desk and you looked at that little, the thing where you can pin stuff, I would spend hours and hours decorating that little bit, because that was my entire world in those 4 or 5 years that I was in school. We weren't really allowed to decorate anything beyond that. I think all the walls and everything had to remain plain and simple. The time and effort I would take to curating this, it was just incredible that I had that much desire to make this little piece of my world like look beautiful and feel inviting. And then I went to university, where I shared my room with another girl, and of course I had half a room, and this was in a country where I didn't have any friends or family. I had moved to the UK all on my own. I promise you, I didn't know a single soul in this country. And even then, I bought like 2 or 3 suitcases with me, and I made that little section of the room look and feel just like a part, an extension of me. Same thing applied in university, like second year, third year, where I had just a room to myself, and now I have an apartment. I do want to share this bit because I want to just say that no matter how big or small you consider your space to be, I think all of these principles do apply, because this is not something that is confined to square foot. It's more about your mindset and your ideologies and how you really think meditatively about the space that surrounds you. This has more to do with actually taking the time to pay attention and care for your environment more than anything else. Because personally, I think taking care of your environment is part of self-care, and it's something that is not just an afterthought in our life and shouldn't be. With that, I want to jump into what I think I've written like a list of 10, but I'm sure there's more. These are just the first things that came to mind. And the first one I will say is learning to take care of the things that you currently own. And this is something that might seem very basic, But I do feel like in some way we tend to neglect things that we already own. Like there are so many things that we have on our wish list or we really want to aspire to have, but I feel like sometimes you forget about the things that we already own and don't look after them enough. I say this as someone who has had to move to a different country with very few belongings, and over time I've had to let go of so much stuff because I kept moving from one place to another. And sometimes I do miss and regret getting rid of some of the things, but it wasn't really my choice. I had to do it at the time because I just didn't have space for those things. Ever since I did have like stable environment, which is this apartment, I've started accumulating things, especially books and ceramics. And for me, it's such a big part of my routine to dust my books every now and then, make sure that they're being aired out, take care of my ceramics, make sure that they are being used. I know that my home has a lot of like little trinkets everywhere, so I take time every now and then to just dust things, and it does help prolong the life of the things that I already own. Especially I notice this in the bathroom, my beautiful soaps and all those things that I buy, because of the UK hard water, which is like lime scale in the water. It leaves marks on all my products in the shower bit, and if I don't constantly like wash and take care of the bottles, they start looking so grimy, and after a while it doesn't feel as nice to use those same products. So I think looking after those products and cleaning them, the next time I go into the shower, I actually feel so excited to use them. Might be a silly example, but it really makes a huge difference. And I would give another example of like cutting boards and wooden utensils. When you buy them, they're so beautiful, but looking after them, oiling them, and maintaining them is what actually makes them last a really, really long time. New things are nice, but I think looking after what you already own should be a big part of living well. The second one is thinking very deeply about who is invited into your space. And depending on what culture you grew up in or what your personal beliefs are about this topic, you might disagree with me, because I know that in a lot of cultures, people are like guests are like God, and I think you should be so hospitable to everybody who enters your home. I agree, but I do think that you don't have to ever feel obligated to have people in your space. I think it's okay to take your time with people, getting to know them, feeling comfortable with them in spaces that are not your home, and then when you figure out that this is someone you feel comfortable enough inviting into your space, I think then you should go ahead and invite them and do your absolute best to be the perfect host according to your own standards always. But I think it's not something that should be a given, that you should always be welcoming to everybody. Same thing goes for objects. I think it's very important to think about what you bring into your home as much as it's important to think about who you bring into your home. You might feel like, oh, like that's cheap, like let me buy it, or like, oh, that's on sale, let me get it because I might use it. And I think when you start doing this, you start putting things that you kind of like or got a good deal on alongside all the things that you actually love, and somehow in this clutter, things that deserve to shine don't. And I've seen this so much. I know that this is again something that is cultural, or maybe a particular period in time people would have like 2-3 sets of like dinnerware, and they would only have like a nice version for guests and then an okay version that they use every day. I don't believe in that. The best things in my home are for me. I use them every single day. I use my favorite ceramic cups, I use my favorite plates, I use my favorite mugs, and the reason is because I don't know who else am I working this hard and buying these beautiful things for if I am not going to enjoy them. And therefore there is no such thing as like a cheap everyday use product. I look after the plates, I am very careful with everything that I use, and I know that this can be different if you have kids. I completely understand that you will have to have children appropriate things, but that also doesn't mean that you need to have a ton of different cheap stuff. You could just buy a couple of very durable children safe products. That's what I'm trying to say, that being very selective about what you're buying and not having too much can help you remove some of that chaos. And I think being intentional about the things that you bring in your space can help you prevent, accumulating clutter in your space. The next point is working with the natural rhythms of your home, noticing how the light changes throughout the day, how the home changes throughout the seasons, and I think taking account of these things and working with it is really important. So for example, if you have a particular window that has the most beautiful light, being able to actually frame your room around it. And instead of just thinking that, okay, I've dumped my desk there when I first moved in, so that's where it has to be. There's no such thing. And I know that there are some people like me who overdo it, who tend to like new layouts all the time. There are a lot of us, but I also know that there are people who are the opposite. Like they'll place furniture when they first move into a home and just leave it. And I think that's also a little bit restricting, because you don't really know a space until you live in it. And as you live in it, you learn about the space and you learn how things work, and where it would be most optimal to have certain things. You should always notice and move with those changes and not feel so set in your like current layout and current structure of the home. I already talked a little bit about this, but do you take time currently in your routine to look after your space? I think this should be a non-negotiable. When I wake up, I have my coffee, I journal, I do the morning emails and have like a full work block. But then around lunchtime, whenever I'm home, I take like a 10-minute quick clear up of everything, including like the bed. Sometimes I don't immediately make the bed, I air it out, and then around lunchtime I'll come and I'll put everything in place, whatever I see. If I run out of time, that's okay, I've done my bit. And then non-negotiable is before I go to bed, I try to put back everything in its place, even if I'm really really tired. I think I've skipped this maybe once or twice, and I just have a different feeling in the morning, because when you wake up and your home is just set and everything is in its place, it's just it, for me definitely it helps me start the day with a clear mind and a blank slate and not much on my to-do list. If you haven't tried it, please try it. But if you already do this and you feel like it's not really possible because of the people you live with or just generally your schedule, I think just focus on a little bit at a time. I think small things like decluttering your bedside table and your workspace and kitchen, these three things are like, you know, where you spend most of your time, so you could start there. And things that you actually have control over, you could start there. I think finding the time to just do a little bit at a time can really make a huge difference in how you experience your space in the long run. Where are the things that excite you the most? So for example, if you love art books, if you love board games, if you have a hobby like painting, where are your supplies stored? Are they in the attic? Are they in a safe somewhere? Are they in like a storage box in a cupboard, or are they actually accessible for you to use when you're feeling overwhelmed or when you are bored? I think this is another thing that we do need to think more about. If we have hobbies and things that make us happy, they shouldn't be tucked away in a place that takes us 10 minutes to set up every time we want to do it. It's our home. Things that make us happy should be accessible to us, and this is something that's come from learning over time. I have so many hobbies, and most of them I do very seriously. Like I love reading, all my books are accessible. I have massive stacks next to my bed. The one hobby that I love doing that I don't do enough is painting, and it does take me some time to set it up. But I thought about all the hobbies that I have and I gave them like a hierarchy, and depending on how much happiness it brought me, I kind of put them in that distance from me, like the resistance. So books are like top tier, stationery, any kind of journaling and all of that is second. Like all of this stuff is very very accessible. Then I have like other hobbies, and then I have like painting, and this has really helped me kind of every time I get bored or if I feel overwhelmed, I immediately go to the things that make me happy, instead of then, you know, having to open up cupboards and look for the things every time I have time to do things, because that can make you lazy sometimes. I think having to set up for a particular hobby every single time you want to do it can be a little bit of a blocker in actually experiencing those things. The last two I think are more personal. The first one is, I've phrased them as questions to myself. Do the things you surround yourself with reflect the way you want to grow? And secondly, do the things in your space showcase your personality? And what do they say about you? I think the second one, yes. Things in my home definitely showcase my personality. Immediately you can get a read for what kind of a person I am. I'm someone who loves ceramics, I love collecting lamps, and I love collecting books, and they are everywhere in my home. And I love little trinkets and memories. I love well designed everyday objects, and I think those things are very evident. There's this child screaming. Okay, I'm gonna go on because I do have to run soon, so I'm gonna try and make this quick. If you walk into Marco's space, you'll see the anime, the instruments, the music, and all the things that he loves. And I think this is so important because when you surround yourself with things that you truly love, you get such a strong sense of who you are because it's everywhere around you. And I think it really helps solidify your identity as a person because you're seeing these things all the time and you tend to associate with them. Not associate, you tend to identify with them. I think it's really important to surround yourself with what you resonate with because I do think that it helps build confidence and your sense of self. Do the things you surround yourself with reflect the way you want to grow? I think this is something that I want to make an entire video about because it can't be covered in just like a small fraction, but I will touch on it because it's relevant. I think most of us have an idea of what we want to do next, or like a version of ourselves that is maybe a much better version or a little bit better version. It doesn't mean that we don't like our current self, but there's nothing wrong in wanting to improve and grow as a person. I think we should always, aim to grow in every way we can. So this question I think is important in the sense that if I want to grow in certain ways, does my current environment support that? And I think the answer to this is very personal for people. For me, I love to grow in so many different ways, and I don't think all of them are ones that can be integrated into design, but I do think some can. And I think it's so important to think about how you've designed your home and does that design support the person who you want to become? And if it doesn't, then working backwards and seeing how you can make those things possible. That's all the points that I had for today. None of this is really cold hard facts. These are just my personal observations, opinions, things that I have personally felt strongly about or personally learned from life and mistakes. So please don't take this as like a must do. If this is your first time watching any of my videos, please do consider subscribing. I'm trying to create loads of different videos around interior design, but I'm branching out to talk about just general life, living, and all of that. Books, if that's something that you're interested in. If you resonated with my words, then you can go ahead and buy my book that's just launched. This is Grounded, a home inspired by the rituals of coffee. This has been a huge project that I have been working on for a long time. I wanted to share my thoughts about space and living, and especially if you like this video, I feel like you'll really enjoy this book. Other than that, I hope to see you next time. Bye.